You're not my dad. Stop pretending. Eli's voice cracked on the last word, and the fork in his hand hit the plate hard enough to make the sauce jump. Nobody at the table moved, not Adrian, whose smile had frozen halfway between hopeful and heartbroken. Not me, though every instinct I had was screaming to fix this before it became a scar. "Buddy," I started. "Don't." Eli shoved his chair back. 7 years old, and already better at ending conversations than most adults I knew. "I don't want him here. I want my real dad." He ran. Not far, just down the hall to his room, but the door slam landed like a verdict. I sat there with my hands flat on the table, counting my own heartbeat, because if I looked at Adrian right now, I was going to see exactly what I didn't want to see. Him trying not to fall apart in front of me. "He didn't mean it," I said, which was a lie I'd used before and would probably use again. "He meant it." Adrian's voice was quiet. Careful. The voice of a man who'd rehearsed staying calm because the alternative terrified him. "Julian, he's never once called me that. Not pretending. Not fake. He's never said it out loud before tonight. Kids say things. Kids repeat things." He looked at me then, and there it was. Not anger. Worse than anger. Doubt. Who's he hearing this from? I didn't have an answer, which was its own kind of answer. Here's what people don't tell you about raising a son alone for 6 years. You get good at reading a room before you even walk into it. I could read Eli's moods from the sound of his footsteps on the stairs. I could read my mother's disapproval from the pause before she said my name. And right now, I could read exactly what Adrian was asking without asking it. "Is there something about this kid's father you haven't told me?" And I still didn't have a clean way to answer, because the truth was, I hadn't told him everything either. 6 years ago, there'd been a name on a hospital form that I'd left blank on purpose. A choice I made in about 4 seconds flat, holding a baby who wasn't going to grow up wondering why his father walked away twice. I got up, because sitting still wasn't going to solve this, and neither was staring at the water ring my glass had left on the table like it owed me an explanation. "I'll talk to him," I said. "Julian?" Adrian caught my wrist before I could pass him. His hand was warm, and for a second, the whole kitchen went quieter than it had any right to. "I'm not asking you to explain him to me tonight. I'm asking if there's something I should know before I fall any further into loving a family that might not want me in it." That word, further, did something to my chest I wasn't ready for. We'd been careful for 8 months. Slow, deliberately unhurried, the way two men who'd both been burned before tend to be, testing every step before putting weight on it. And now my son had just put a crack straight through the floor. "You're not falling into anything you weren't invited into," I said. "I invited you." He didn't. I didn't have a comeback for that one. Adrian wasn't wrong, and the honesty of it, no accusation, just the plain, aching truth, was worse than if he'd yelled. I found Eli sitting on his bed with his knees pulled to his chest, glaring at a shoebox of superhero figures like they'd personally betrayed him too. "You want to tell me where that came from?" I asked, sitting on the floor instead of the bed, because some conversations go better at eye level, not above it. He was quiet for a long time. Then, "Grandma said my real dad has a lot of money. She said he'd probably want to meet me if he knew about me." Everything in my body went very, very still. "Grandma said that. She said it's not fair that you never told him." His eyes, my late mother's exact shade of brown, filled up fast. "Is it true? Is my dad rich?" I thought about the blank line on the hospital form. I thought about a man I hadn't let myself think about in 6 years. A name I'd buried under work and diapers, and every ordinary Tuesday I'd fought to give my son instead. I thought about the fact that somewhere out there, a version of tonight had been waiting this whole time, patient as a debt collector, and it had finally found the door. "Eli," I said, and my voice came out steadier than I felt. "We need to talk, for real this time." He looked at me like he already knew the ground was about to move. He wasn't wrong. "Is it true?" Eli asked again, quieter this time, like he was scared the answer might get louder if he said it soft enough. "Is my dad rich?" I sat with that question hanging in the air between us, close enough to touch, and I thought about every version of this conversation I'd rehearsed in my head over 6 years, and never once found the nerve to have. My hands were flat against my knees. I made myself breathe before I answered, because the last thing this kid needed was to watch me panic. I don't know if he's rich, I said, which was true and also a coward's answer, because I did know. I'd seen the name often enough in headlines I'd taught myself to scroll past. But that's not the important part, Eli. Then what's the important part? Good question. Smarter than his age, same as always. The important part is that I've been your dad since the day you were born. Every scraped knee, every nightmare, every single first day of school. My voice caught on that last one and I let it, because pretending to be unshakable in front of him had never worked anyway. That doesn't change because of a name. He studied me the way he studied everything, like the truth was a puzzle piece he could feel the edges of but not yet fit into place. Grandma said he doesn't know about me. There it was, the real question underneath the question. That's true, I admitted. Why didn't you tell him? I could have given him the simple version. I could have said it was complicated, said he was too young to understand, said all the things adults say when they want a conversation to end. But Eli didn't do simple versions, not since he was old enough to notice when people were dodging him, and I wasn't going to start lying to him tonight of all nights. Because I was scared, I said. Because 6 years ago I made a choice by myself, in about 4 seconds, and I've had to live with it every day since. I thought I was protecting you. From what? From a man who might have looked at you and seen an inconvenience instead of a son. The words landed heavier than I meant them to. Eli's face did something complicated, hurt and curious at the same time, and I watched him decide not to cry, which broke something in me worse than if he had. From the hallway, I heard Adrian's footsteps stop just short of the door, not entering, giving us room. That was who he was, careful even when his own world was cracking, and something about knowing he was standing there, holding himself back out of respect for a conversation that wasn't his to interrupt, made my chest ache in a completely different direction. Do you want to meet him? I asked Eli, because pretending that question wasn't coming would only make it worse later. Eli picked at the edge of his blanket. I don't know. Maybe? Is that bad? No. I reached out and put my hand over his, and he let me, small fingers curling into my palm the way they had since he was small enough to fit against my chest. It's not bad. It's not anything you have to be ashamed of. Wanting to know where you come from doesn't mean you love me less. You won't be mad? I could never be mad at you for wanting answers, buddy. I just need you to know that whatever happens, whoever he turns out to be, I'm not going anywhere. He nodded slowly, and some of the tightness in his shoulders let go. I stayed there a minute longer, watching him settle, watching his breathing even out into something closer to safe. And then I kissed the top of his head and told him to get some sleep. I found Adrian exactly where I expected, leaning against the hallway wall with his arms crossed, not out of anger but like he needed something to hold on to. You heard that, I said. Some of it. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the closed door, like it might open again. Julian, who is he? I could have kept dodging. God knows I'd gotten good at it. But Adrian had spent 8 months being patient with the parts of my life I hadn't let him see, and tonight had just handed him a door I couldn't pretend didn't exist. Marcus Calloway, I said. His head turned so fast I almost laughed, except nothing about tonight was funny. Calloway, as in Calloway Industries, as in the guy whose face is on business magazines. That's the one. You had his kid and never told him. I had a one-night thing that turned into the best thing in my life, and I made a decision to raise my son without a man who saw me as a mistake he made before his wedding. The words came out sharper than I meant, old anger surfacing faster than I could stop it. I'm not proud of how I handled it, Adrian. But I'm not going to apologize for protecting my kid from a man who didn't want either of us. Adrian was quiet for a long moment, and in that silence I could hear my own pulse, loud and uneven, because whatever he said next was going to decide something between us that I wasn't ready to lose. Are you sure he didn't want you? He finally asked. Or are you sure because it was easier than finding out? The question hit somewhere I hadn't let anyone touch in 6 years, and I didn't have an answer ready. I'm trying to understand the man I've spent 8 months falling for, and right now all I know is you built a wall 6 years ago, and you've never once let me see what's on the other side of it. You know me, Adrian. I know the version of you that started after Eli was born. His voice wasn't cruel. That was the worst part. It was gentle in a way that cut deeper than anger could have. I don't know the version of you that existed before that decision. I don't know what actually happened with Marcus Calloway. I know what you've told yourself happened. My jaw tightened. Those are the same thing. Are they? I turned away from him because I needed a second where he wasn't looking at me like he could see straight through the story I'd been telling myself since I was 26 years old, standing in a hospital hallway with a phone in my hand and a name I never dialed. The truth was messier than the version I gave people. The truth was, Marcus Calloway hadn't rejected me outright. The truth was, I'd found out about his engagement 3 weeks after our one night together, found it in a society page photo of him with his arm around a woman I'd never met, and I'd made a decision, in the space of one furious, humiliated breath, that he didn't get to know about a child he was going to raise as some kind of shameful footnote to his perfect corporate marriage. I never gave him the chance to prove me wrong. I just assumed, and I built 6 years of certainty on top of that assumption, brick by brick, until it felt like fact instead of fear. "Say something," Adrian said behind me. "What do you want me to say?" "I want you to tell me the truth." Not the story, the truth. I turned back around and he was closer than I expected. Close enough that I could see the exact moment his frustration cracked into something softer, something scared. Because underneath all of it, Adrian wasn't angry at me. He was terrified of losing something he'd only just started to believe he could have. I never told him because I was ashamed, I said, and the words came out rough, unpracticed, nothing like the smooth explanation I gave everyone else. Not of Eli, never of Eli. Ashamed that I let myself fall for a man for one night and thought it might turn into something, and then found out he was already promised to somebody else. I didn't want to be the mistake in his story, so I made sure he never got the chance to make me one. Something in Adrian's face shifted, understanding replacing the hurt, though it didn't erase it completely. "That's not shame, Julian." He reached up, his hand hovering near my jaw, like he wasn't sure he had permission yet. "That's protecting yourself. There's a difference. Doesn't feel like one right now. Because your son just found out the truth exists, and you weren't ready." His thumb finally brushed my cheek, light, testing. "Nobody's ready for that, but you're not allowed to disappear into guilt right now. Eli needs you steady. I need you steady." The warmth of his hand against my face did something unfair to my resolve, loosened something I'd been holding tight since dinner started falling apart. I leaned into it before I could stop myself, and the air between us went thick and quiet, charged with the kind of tension that had been building for 8 careful months and had nowhere left to hide tonight. "I'm sorry," I said, "for not telling you sooner." "I'm not asking for sorry," his voice dropped lower. "I'm asking you to let me in, all the way in, not just the parts that are easy to love." My heart was doing something reckless against my ribs. What if the parts that aren't easy scare you off? "Try me." I looked at him for a long moment, at the steadiness in his eyes even now, even with everything cracked wide open between us, and something in my chest loosened enough to let a breath out that I felt like I'd been holding for 6 years. "Okay," I said quietly. Neither of us moved. The hallway held its breath with us, and somewhere behind Eli's door, I could hear the faint rustle of a 7-year-old finally drifting toward sleep, unaware that the ground under all of us had just shifted for good. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I almost ignored it. Almost let the moment with Adrian stretch a second longer, his hand still warm against my jaw. The two of us standing in that quiet hallway like the rest of the world had politely stepped out of the room. But the buzz came again, insistent, and some old instinct in me, the one that never fully trusted silence, made me pull it out. The number wasn't saved. Area code from downtown, corporate exchange, the kind of prefix that belonged to a building with a lobby taller than most churches. I answered before I could talk myself out of it. "Hello? Is this Julian Reyes?" A woman's voice, clipped, professional, the kind trained to sound pleasant while giving you no room to say no. My stomach dropped before she even finished the sentence. "Who's asking?" "My name is Priya Nandan. I'm calling on behalf of Marcus Calloway." The hallway tilted. Adrian's hand slid from my jaw to my shoulder, steadying, because he must have read something in my face that gave it away before I said a word out loud. "I think you have the wrong number," I said, which was a lie so obvious I nearly laughed at myself for trying it. I don't believe I do. A pause, deliberate. The kind that told me she already knew exactly how much power that sentence held. Mr. Calloway received some information today that he needs to discuss with you directly. He'd like to meet tomorrow. 10 o'clock, his office downtown. My heartbeat was loud enough that I wondered if she could hear it through the phone. How did he get this number? Mr. Calloway has resources, Mr. Reyes. I'm sure you can appreciate that. Her tone didn't shift, not even slightly, like she delivered sentences like that every day of her life. 10 o'clock, should I confirm? I looked at Adrian. He wasn't saying anything, just watching me with an expression that mixed worry and something steadier underneath it, like he'd already decided he wasn't going anywhere no matter what came out of my mouth next. What information, I said slowly, did Mr. Calloway receive today? The pause on the other end told me everything the words didn't. I'm not authorized to discuss that over the phone. 10 o'clock, Mr. Reyes. The line went dead before I could answer either way. I stood there holding the phone against my ear a second too long, the dial tone humming into the quiet, my mind racing through every version of what could have landed on Marcus Calloway's desk today. A DNA registry hit, a hospital record somebody dug up, my mother, God help her, deciding to take matters into her own hands the way she'd clearly already started with Eli. Julian, Adrian's voice pulled me back. What did they say? He wants to meet me, tomorrow, 10 o'clock. I lowered the phone, my hand not quite steady. He knows something. About Eli? Has to be. I ran a hand through my hair, the adrenaline finally catching up to me, sharp and unwelcome. 6 years of silence, and now somebody hands him the truth on a schedule I don't control. Adrian was quiet for a moment, watching me the way he did when he was working something out, before he said it out loud. Do you want me to come with you? The offer landed soft, but it still hit hard. Because 20 minutes ago, we'd been standing in the wreckage of a conversation about trust, and here he was already choosing to stand next to me in the next one. You don't have to do that. I know I don't. He stepped closer, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating off him, even through the tension still coiled in my chest. But you're not walking into that building alone, carrying 6 years of guilt by yourself. Not if I have anything to say about it. I searched his face for a second, half expecting to find hesitation somewhere in it, some flicker of a man reconsidering what he'd just signed up for. I didn't find one. Okay, I said, and my voice cracked on the word in a way that had nothing to do with fear, and everything to do with how unfamiliar it felt to not be facing this alone. Behind us, Eli's door creaked open an inch, just enough for a small, sleepy voice to drift into the hallway. Dad, is everything okay? I looked at Adrian. He looked at me. Neither of us had an honest answer that wouldn't scare a 7-year-old half to death, and somewhere across the city, in an office 40 floors up, a man who didn't know he was a father yet was already rearranging his entire week around finding out. Everything's fine, buddy. I crossed the hallway and crouched in front of him, keeping my voice level even though my pulse hadn't slowed down since the phone call. Grown-up stuff. Nothing for you to worry about. Eli studied me with those same brown eyes that had been studying me all night, too sharp to fully believe the lie but too tired to argue with it. You promise? I promise. I brushed his hair back from his forehead, the gesture more for me than him, something to steady my own hands. Go back to sleep. I'll be right here. He nodded, eyes already sliding shut again before he'd even made it back to his pillow, and I stood there in his doorway a moment longer, watching his chest rise and fall, memorizing the sight of him safe and unaware, because something told me tomorrow was going to change the shape of his whole world, whether I wanted it to or not. I pulled the door until it sat open just a crack, the way he liked it, and turned to find Adrian leaning against the wall again, arms crossed, watching me with an expression I couldn't quite name. You're good with him, he said quietly. I've had 6 years of practice. That's not what I mean. He pushed off the wall, closing the distance between us the way he had earlier, except this time, there was no accusation in it, just something softer, steadier. I mean, you're good at protecting people, even when it costs you something. I let out a breath that came out shakier than I intended. Feels like it's cost me a lot tonight. It has. He didn't sugarcoat it, which was one of the things I'd fallen for in the first place, back when I still had the sense to be careful about falling for anyone. But you're still standing. That matters. We ended up in the kitchen without really deciding to, the way people do when their bodies need something to do while their minds are somewhere else entirely. I filled 2 glasses of water I wasn't going to drink and set them on the counter, more for the motion of it than the purpose. "Can I ask you something?" Adrian said, leaning against the counter across from me. "And I need you to actually answer it, not the polished version. Okay? Are you scared of seeing him tomorrow, or are you scared of what you'll feel when you do?" The question landed somewhere underneath my ribs, precise, like he'd been saving it up. I thought about Marcus Calloway, the way I remembered him, not the magazine version, not the corporate headshot smile that showed up in every business article, but the version I'd actually met. Sharp-witted in a way that caught me off guard, quiet when he thought nobody was watching. A man who'd laughed at something stupid I said in a hotel bar and made me feel, for one single reckless night, like I mattered to somebody who mattered to the world. I hadn't let myself remember that version in years. It was easier to hate the headline than to miss the man. Both, I admitted. I built a story where he's the villain, because it was easier than admitting I might have walked away from something real out of fear instead of certainty. Adrian didn't say anything right away. He just watched me, patient in a way that made the confession feel safer than it should have. "What if he's not who you decided he was?" he finally asked. "Then I owe him 6 years he can never get back, and I owe Eli a father he never got to know because I was too proud to ask a question." "And what if he is exactly who you decided he was?" I met Adrian's eyes across the small kitchen, the tension between us finally settling into something that felt less like a wound and more like a decision being made in real time. Then I protected my son from exactly what I thought I was protecting him from, and I walk out of that building with nothing changed except confirmation. I picked up one of the water glasses just to give my hands something to do. Either way, tomorrow I find out which story I've actually been living in. Adrian reached across the space between us and took the glass from my hand, setting it back down, then laced his fingers through mine instead. Slow, deliberate, giving me every chance to pull away if I wanted to. I didn't want to. "Whichever story it is," he said quietly, "you're not finding out alone." His fingers stayed laced through mine, and the kitchen felt smaller than it had a minute ago, like the walls had leaned in to listen. I could hear the refrigerator humming somewhere behind us, the faint tick of the clock over the stove, every small ordinary sound suddenly loud against the quiet we'd built between us. "You didn't have to say that," I said. "I know." His thumb moved slowly over my knuckles, an absent gesture that felt anything but absent. I wanted to. I looked down at our hands, at the way his fit against mine like it had been doing it for years instead of months, and something loosened in my chest that had been wound tight since the moment Eli slammed his door. 8 months, I said. That's not that long. Long enough to know some things. Adrian tilted his head, studying me with an expression that made me feel like the only thing in the room worth looking at. Long enough to know you make terrible coffee and pretend it's fine. Long enough to know you hum old songs when you think nobody's listening. Long enough to know that when you're scared, you get quiet instead of loud, and everybody around you has to learn to read the silence. That's a lot of things for 8 months. I pay attention. He stepped closer, close enough now that I could feel the warmth coming off him, close enough that the space between us had become its own kind of tension, charged and unresolved. I've been paying attention since the second week, if I'm honest. I just didn't say anything because I didn't want to scare you off before you were ready. My heart was doing something reckless again, the same thing it had done in the hallway an hour ago, except now there was no interruption coming. No phone call, no small voice from behind a door. And now? I asked. Now I think you need to know somebody's standing here on purpose. Not because of Eli, not because of tomorrow, not because of anything except that I want to be. The air between us had gone thick, the kind of quiet that asked a question neither of us had said out loud yet. I could feel my own pulse in my throat, could feel the pull of him even standing perfectly still, and for the first time all night the fear in my chest made room for something else entirely. Adrian? Yeah? I'm terrified of tomorrow. I know. I don't know how to be terrified and still feel this steady at the same time. My voice came out rougher than I meant it to. That doesn't make sense. It makes perfect sense. He lifted his free hand, brushing his knuckles gently along my jaw, the same gesture from the hallway, except slower now, less careful, more certain. Fear and safety aren't opposites, Julian. Sometimes the safest thing in the room is the only reason you can afford to be scared at all. I didn't have an answer for that, not one made of words anyway, so I let my forehead drop against his instead, breathing him in, the warm, clean smell of him grounding me more than anything had all night. "Can I kiss you?" he murmured, close enough that I felt the words more than heard them. "You're asking now? After everything tonight?" "I'm asking because it matters that you want this too, not just need it." Something about that steadied me more than anything else he could have said. I closed the last inch of distance myself, answering the question the only way that felt honest, and his hand slid from my jaw into my hair as the kiss deepened, slow and unhurried, despite everything crashing around us, like he'd decided this one thing in the middle of the chaos was going to be done right. When we finally broke apart, both of us slightly out of breath, he rested his forehead against mine again, and for one suspended moment the fear of tomorrow, the phone call, the name Marcus Calloway, all of it went quiet. "Whatever happens tomorrow," Adrian said softly, "this part is real. Remember that going in?" I nodded, unable to trust my voice just yet, and outside the kitchen window, the city lights kept burning steady against the dark, indifferent to the fact that somewhere across town, in an office 40 floors up, a man was about to have his entire life rewritten in the morning. The city lights blurred past the window of Adrian's car in long amber streaks, and I couldn't tell anymore if the tightness in my chest was fear or the memory of his mouth still warm against mine. Sleep hadn't come easy. It hadn't come at all, if I was honest. Just a long stretch of staring at the ceiling with Eli's voice and Priya Nandan's clipped professionalism taking turns in my head until the sky outside turned gray, and then gold, and then this. Glass towers catching the morning sun like blades. Adrian's hand found mine on the console, without either of us saying anything. He didn't ask if I was okay. He already knew I wasn't. The building swallowed us whole, marble floors and a lobby so tall my neck ached looking up at it. And by the time the elevator doors opened onto the 40th floor, my heartbeat had climbed into my throat and stayed there. Priya was waiting. Same voice from the phone, sharper in person, sizing me up in the 2 seconds it took to say my name. "Mr. Reyes, he's ready for you." "I'm coming with him," Adrian said, and something in his tone left no room for negotiation. She hesitated, glanced at a closed door behind her, then nodded once. "Follow me." The office was the kind of big that made a statement, floor-to-ceiling glass, the whole city laid out under it like something you could own if you wanted to badly enough. And standing at the window with his back to us, hands in his pockets, was a man I hadn't let myself picture clearly in 6 years. He turned around. My chest caved in on itself. I remembered dark eyes, sharp and unreadable, but I hadn't remembered how much they'd soften and then sharpen again in the space of a single breath, the way they did the second he looked at me. He looked older, tired in a way the magazines never showed, and underneath the tailored suit and the corner office, for one unguarded second, he looked exactly like the man from that hotel bar 6 years ago, the one who'd laughed at something stupid I said, like it was the best thing he'd heard all year. "Julian," Marcus said, and my name and his voice did something violent to my composure. "Marcus." Nobody moved for a second. Adrian's hand found the small of my back, steady, grounding, a silent reminder that I wasn't standing here alone, no matter how much it felt that way. Marcus's eyes flicked to Adrian, then back to me, something unreadable passing over his face before he gestured toward the chairs in front of his desk. "Please, sit." I didn't sit. Neither did he, not really. He just leaned back against the edge of his desk, arms crossed, and I realized we were both circling this conversation the same way, refusing to give an inch of ground before we knew what the other one had. "I got a call last night," I said, because waiting for him to start felt like handing him more control than I could afford. Your assistant said you received information. I did. He reached behind him without looking, picked up a folder from the desk, and held it out. Not thrown, not slammed, just offered. Steady, though I could see the tightness in his knuckles that betrayed how much that steadiness was costing him. A woman named Grace Reyes reached out to my office yesterday afternoon. The floor dropped out from under me. My mother, your mother, Marcus confirmed, provided documentation, a birth certificate, photographs, a timeline. His jaw flexed, the first real crack in his composure. She seems to believe I have a right to know I have a son. Adrian's hand tightened at my back. I didn't dare look at him. I couldn't look away from Marcus, whose eyes had gone glassy in a way I never expected from a man built entirely out of headlines and boardrooms. 6 years, Julian. His voice cracked on my name this time, all that careful control finally splintering. 6 years I've had a son I didn't know existed, and you're going to stand there and let me find out from a folder your mother mailed to my office like it was a business proposal? You were engaged, I said, and my voice shook with an old anger I'd been carrying so long it had started to feel like part of my skeleton. 3 weeks after that night, I saw your face in a magazine with a ring on her finger. What was I supposed to think? You were supposed to ask me. His voice rose, sharp now, years of restraint cracking wide open. Instead, you decided for both of us. You decided I didn't deserve the truth. I decided my son didn't deserve to be somebody's secret. The room went silent, the kind of silence that has weight to it, that presses against your ribs. Marcus stared at me like I'd struck him, and for the first time since walking through that door, I saw something underneath the anger. Grief. 6 years of it, arriving all at once. I need to see him, Marcus said quietly. Today. The words hit me like a wall I hadn't braced for. 6 years of imagining this moment, and none of my imagined versions had prepared me for how fast it would actually move once it started. Like a dam that doesn't crack slowly, it just goes. That's not how this works, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. You don't get to decide the timeline on this. Not after 6 years of not knowing existed because of a choice I made, and not today either, because it's my choice how fast we introduce him to a stranger, even if that stranger is his father. Marcus's jaw tightened, and for a second, I watched him fight the instinct to argue, the instinct of a man used to getting exactly what he asked for the moment he asked for it. He didn't win that fight easily, but he won it. You're right, he said, and the admission looked like it cost him. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to make demands. He stopped, ran a hand through his hair, and for a second, the CEO fell away completely, and all that was left was a man who just found out he'd missed 6 birthdays, 6 Christmases, 6 years of a life that belonged to him too. I don't know how to do this slowly. I've never had to. Welcome to parenting, I said, and it came out sharper than I meant, though something in Marcus's face almost cracked into something like a laugh, like he recognized the deflection for what it was, and appreciated it anyway. Adrian's hand hadn't left my back this whole time, a steady point of contact I hadn't realized I needed until I felt how much I was leaning into it. Marcus's eyes flicked to him again, longer this time, taking in the way we stood together, the way Adrian hadn't stepped back once since we walked through the door. Who are you? Marcus asked, not unkindly, just direct in the way I remembered him being, cutting straight to the thing everyone else tiptoed around. Adrian Cole. He didn't offer his hand, and neither did Marcus, some unspoken territory being drawn in the space between them. I've been with Julian 8 months. I'm the one Eli rejected at dinner last night, if you want the full picture. Something flickered across Marcus's face, surprise maybe, or the first crack of understanding that this situation was bigger and messier than a single folder full of documents could explain. He rejected you, Marcus repeated slowly. Told him to stop pretending to be his dad. Adrian's voice was even, but I could feel the tension in his hand where it still touched my back. Right before your assistant called. Marcus looked at me then, something complicated moving behind his eyes, and I braced myself for anger, for some accusation about the timing, about how convenient it was that his existence surfaced the same night Eli's world cracked open. Instead, what I saw was something closer to recognition, like he understood better than either of us expected what it felt like to watch a kid's loyalty get tested in real time. "He's protecting you," Marcus said quietly, looking at Adrian. "Whatever he said, it wasn't really about you. Kids that age, they don't reject people. They reject change they don't understand yet." Quote. It wasn't what I expected him to say, and the fact that it was true, the fact that it sounded like something a father would know, twisted something painful and unfamiliar in my chest. "How do you know that?" I asked, quieter now. "Because I watched my own father get replaced when I was 8, and I did the exact same thing to the man who tried." Marcus's voice had gone rough, an old wound surfacing without warning. "I know what it looks like from the inside." The office had gone very quiet, the three of us standing in a triangle of old grief and new fear. And for the first time since I'd walked through that door, the anger in my chest made room for something more complicated. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But the beginning of understanding that the story I'd built about Marcus Calloway for 6 years might have been missing pieces I never bothered to ask about. "I'm not ready to bring him here," I said. "Not today. Not to an office. If this happens, it happens somewhere he feels safe, on his terms, when he's ready." Marcus nodded slowly, and I watched him swallow whatever protest had risen in his throat, watched him choose, deliberately, to let me hold this decision even though every instinct in his body was clearly screaming to fight for less distance, not more. "Okay," he said, "whatever you need, just don't shut me out again, please." The please landed heavier than anything else he'd said all morning, and behind me, Adrian's hand pressed firmer against my back, steady, grounding, as I stood in the middle of two men who both, in completely different ways, were asking me to trust them with the most important thing in my life. "Give me a few days," I said finally. "Let me talk to him. Let me find the right moment. I'll call you. I'll be waiting," Marcus said, and for once there was no command in it, just a man learning in real time how to ask instead of demand. The days that followed moved slower than I expected, and faster than I was ready for, both at once. Adrian stayed close through all of it, steady in a way that made the ground feel solid even when everything else was shifting. We talked to Eli together. No pressure, just truth laid out gently, piece by piece, the way you'd hand a kid something breakable and trust him to hold it right. He surprised me. Kids always do. "Can I bring my dinosaur?" he asked. The morning I finally told him Marcus wanted to meet him properly, somewhere easy, somewhere that wasn't a glass tower 40 floors up, in case it's weird. "You can bring whatever makes you feel brave," I told him, and he nodded like that settled it completely. We met at the park 3 blocks from the house, neutral ground, sunlight and open grass instead of marble floors. I watched Marcus arrive without the suit, without the assistant, without a single trace of the boardroom left on him. Just a man in jeans, standing awkwardly by a bench, like he'd forgotten how to exist outside of power for a minute. Eli held my hand the whole walk over. Adrian walked on his other side, close but not crowding, giving the moment room to be exactly what it needed to be. "Hi," Marcus said, crouching down to Eli's height without being asked, which told me more about him than any folder full of documents ever could. "I'm Marcus." Eli studied him the way he studied everything. Careful, assessing. That same sharp intelligence I'd watched shape every hard conversation of his short life. "Are you really my dad?" "I am." Marcus's voice cracked slightly, and he didn't hide it. Didn't perform strength he didn't feel. "I didn't know about you until a few days ago. If I had, I would have been here every single day since you were born. I need you to know that." "Why didn't you know?" "Grown-up stuff got in the way. Mistakes got made. None of them were yours, and none of them are your fault." He glanced up at me for half a second, something like gratitude passing between us, an acknowledgement that I'd let him say this himself instead of softening it for him. "I'm sorry it took this long to meet you." Eli was quiet for a moment, turning the dinosaur over in his hands. "Are you going to try to take me away from Dad and Adrian?" The question landed heavy, and I watched Marcus absorb it fully before answering. No rushed reassurance. No easy promise thrown out just to smooth the moment over. "No," Marcus said firmly. "Your dad raised you. He loves you more than anything in this world. I can see that just from watching the two of you together for 5 minutes. I don't want to take anything away from you. I just want to be part of what's already there, if you'll let me." Something in Eli's shoulders eased, the wariness softening into something closer to curiosity. "You have a lot of money," Grandma said. Marcus actually laughed, surprised out of him, and it changed his whole face, made him look younger, less like a headline and more like the man from a hotel bar 6 years ago who'd made me feel like I mattered. "I do. But I'd trade every dollar of it for the years I missed with you, if I could. Since I can't, I'm just going to try to make up for it going forward, slowly, however fast you want to go." Eli looked back at me, checking, the way he always did when he was deciding whether something was safe to trust. I nodded, and something in him relaxed completely. "Okay," he said. "You can come to my game on Saturday. I'm playing soccer." "I would love that," Marcus said, and his voice broke fully this time, no pretense left in it at all. I watched my son take a cautious step toward the father he never knew, watched 6 years of fear and silence finally exhale into something that looked, impossibly, like the beginning of peace. Adrian's hand found mine, steady as always, and I laced my fingers through his, without thinking twice about who might see. Marcus caught the movement, glanced at our joined hands, and something like understanding settled over his features, no jealousy in it, just quiet acceptance of a family that had already been built, one he was being welcomed into, rather than one he'd come to claim. "Thank you," he said to both of us, "for not shutting the door." "We almost did," Adrian admitted, "more than once." "But you didn't." Marcus watched Eli chase a bird across the grass, dinosaur clutched tight in one hand, laughing at nothing in particular, the way only kids can. That's what matters. I stood there in the afternoon sun, Adrian's hand warm in mine, my son laughing somewhere in front of us, and Marcus watching him, with the kind of wonder that comes from finally being handed something you'd already given up hoping for. 6 years of silence had finally found its way to this. 3 men and a boy, building something new out of the wreckage of old fear. No villains left standing, only people learning, slowly and imperfectly, how to choose each other. For the first time in a long time, I let myself believe we were going to be okay. Thank you so much for watching Moonlight BL Tales. If this story touched your heart, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe for more emotional BL romance stories. See you in the next story.